My name is Heather HEWARD. I work at the University of Idaho in the College of Natural Resources. I have 8 years of wildland fire experience, and I've been teaching at the University of Idaho since 2012. I teach fire management and fire modeling, GIS, and also just general natural resources classes at the university there. The catastrophic event that resulted in change in my experience in fire was an event that occurred in 2006. I was working on a helicopter in the McCall area on the Crassel Ranger District, the Crassel helicopter, the Heli-Rappel crew, and we had a Type 3 ship, an A-Star, and that year there were a lot of fires that in our area, and we had a lot of different missions that we were running as a helicopter crew, and one of those missions was to remove a lookout from her post. She was needing to get some rehab of equipment, and she was also not able to see very much because of the smoke that was in the area for a long period of time. And as the helicopter left the lookout, the helicopter's tail rotor either struck a tree or was struck by material that was in uncovered baskets next to the helicopter, and then this caused the helicopter to crash. And the pilot, he attempted to auto-rotate the helicopter, but without sufficient space and sufficient without sufficient space to do that, they crashed onto the road off of the river there, and all 4 people that were on board were killed. And the reason that was a significant event that led to change is partly personally. It led to a personal realization of the dangers of working in the wildland fire environment in a variety of different capacities. It also led to change in the way that helicopters equip their baskets on the outside, so that they are covered with a material that doesn't allow items to fly out of them, potentially hitting the tail rotor again. And it, again, probably more on that personal side again, is it allows that experience allows me to have a personal example when I talk to my students about the realities of working in this environment. They are able to understand, they feel that energy that I have because of that incident, and they believe me more about how important it is to focus on their safety, not just around aircraft, but also in other dangerous situations that occur around fires.
In 1976, my second sector boss assignment was to the Battlement Creek fire in western Colorado. I supervised the Mormon Lake hotshots on a Friday evening. The next day they were assigned to an adjacent sector in charge of conducting a burnout along a ridge. 4 members of the crew, including the superintendent, were burned over. 1 member survived. The superintendent got up and ran cross ridge, but ultimately did not survive. And the aftermath of that fire resulted in the requirement for all firefighters to carry fire shelters. While the Mormon Lake hotshots had fire shelters, they'd left them in camp because they were extra equipment and heavier to carry, and they didn't feel they needed them in this particular fire. It had been somewhat calm prior to the day in mention. But it's certain in my mind that all 4 would have survived had they had fire shelters. Again, 1 of the individuals that was burned over did survive. He survived by keeping down and not standing up or looking up when the fire passed over them. The others had risen or actually got up and ran, and were overtaken by the fire, had breathed in apparently hot smoke, and succumbed. But that was a seminal event in my career, and one event, a catastrophic event, that led to a significant change in policy, i.e. carrying fire shelters as a mandatory requirement.
Marta Miralles, Catalan Fire Service. I want to talk about a fire in 1998 in Catalonia. It was a 27 hectares fire that mostly more than half of them burned in only one day, and it made a change because it came after the large fires in 1994. That was also a catastrophic year, but we went out of it saying it's conditions that are unexpected and that will not be repeated, and it's just because of the extreme meteorology. But in 1998, we could no longer say the same. The year was a mild year, and the fire was really catastrophic in that sense. So it created a change in the fire service, mainly because it created a change in the fire service. Mainly, it introduced fire analysis and it introduced forest language, in the fire service. It introduced fire analysis in the fire service. The fire service was only water-based mainly. We introduced fire, we introduced prescribed burnings, we introduced heavy machinery, we reintroduced the same like fire using manual tools in specific places. So we broadened the bunch of operations. We introduced analysis at a tactical level, at a dispatching level. So that was probably the main change was after this 98 fire. And it was because we could no longer blame somebody. In 94, either we blamed somebody or we said it's because bad luck, meteorology, but we couldn't keep on saying the same. So that's mainly my fire.
Hi, I'm Mike Beasley. I'm a retired forest FMO from California, and I am currently working for a nonprofit, Firefighters United for Safety, Ethics, and Ecology. To my mind, the most significant change was from the South Canyon fire in 1994. There were some other things involved, some other fires and some other considerations, but that fire and fatality of several hot shots and a smoke jumper led to the 1995 Federal Fire Policy Review, which was a significant document in that it rounded up all the policy for all the federal agencies into one master document and actually elevated natural ecosystem health and fire as an ecological process to a point where it had never been before. And I think that was very important.
So Bill was asking me what is an example of a catastrophic fire that led to a change. And I would say a good example is actually the 1949 Man Gulch fire in Montana, in which 13 firefighters lost their lives. And that event precipitated the investment in the Fire Sciences Lab here in Missoula that persists to this day and has had a measurable impact on how we think about fire and on fire science over that period.
So in California, we probably have some of the most extreme regulations regarding defensible space and housing, and they're all resulting from catastrophic fires. And we find that as a result of these catastrophic fires, we start developing new rules and we've learned new things. So after our 1991 Oakland Hills fire that burned down over 2,000 homes in an afternoon, started requiring defensible space and rated roofs. Well, after we had another giant firestorm in Southern California that in 2003 realized, maybe our 30-foot of defensible space doesn't work as much. So we actually increased that up to 100 feet as a response to that. And starting in 2008, we started having the California the fire code and the building code. There's a chapter 7A there that we're looking at everything from roofs to decking to windows and things. And these is all in response to major wildland fires that we've had. I've also seen that I was at Black Saturday in Australia that killed 173 people, and they certainly changed up sort of the requirements in terms of evacuation, communication to different places that are out there. And this is all in response to major things. I wish that we could get on, be proactive in terms of how we mitigate fire risk, but unfortunately it seems that we don't have any change until there's a major catastrophe that we're responding to it instead of being on the front end.
Hi, my name is Tom Zimmerman. I'm retired from the U.S. Forest Service, also worked for the National Park Service, Bureau of Land Management. My relation to wildland fire today is that I have had a 30-plus year career in wildland fire management in the 3 federal agencies. In terms of catastrophic events that I've seen that have influenced a change in processes or procedures or policy, probably the Yellowstone fires in 1988 were one of the most important ones, where they were what were called prescribed natural fires, and that prompted a change in policy which immediately tried to constrain, the policy was trying to constrain the use of prescribed natural fire, but what it served to do over the long term was to make us more accountable in implementing the prescribed natural fire program through things like preparedness plans, preparedness levels, and then we developed long-term risk assessment procedures and more fire behavior prediction processes, which served to make us accountable with long-duration fires and set the stage for getting into long-duration fires in the future. Then the South Canyon fire in 1994 prompted a policy review, and in 1995 a new policy came out which gave us wildland fire as the principal designation of what we dealt with, and did away with prescribed natural fire, but allowed us to manage fire as wildland fire use, where we did not suppress fires but managed them for beneficial purposes, which was very similar to what prescribed natural fire was, but done under a different way. We were able to get emergency funding authorized to use for wildland fire use, which was a huge change because we didn't have limits on authorized funding like we did with prescribed natural fire. So that paved the way for expansion of the fire use program and more of that across the country. And then prescribed fire in 2000 at Los Alamos, New Mexico, the Cerro Grande prescribed fire, caused us to do a review of policy and move forward that the policy was sound, but that we did some clarification on how things worked. And since then, there's been a couple clarifications, but really not prompted by any significant events or whatever. But for about 3 policy changes, and which led to procedures and process changes, those were really stimulated and triggered by those significant events: Yellowstone fires, South Canyon fire, Cerro Grande fire.
Hi, I'm Sheila Murphy. I'm a research hydrologist with the U.S. Geological Survey in Boulder, Colorado. One wildland fire change that I have noticed is there were a significant fire in Colorado, the Hayman Fire in 2002, that burned a headwater area for Denver Water and changed thoughts about what we needed to do about fires and water in Colorado, in that it was really recognized that fires are a risk to surface water supplies. And so Denver Water and a number of other water providers are starting to think about how to plan for fires and the problems that can cause for water supplies.
I'm Mike Norton. I'm a Director General with the Canadian Forest Service based in Edmonton, Alberta. The example I'd pick is just this past summer in 2017, British Columbia had record-breaking fires across the province. The change that appears to be happening right away is related to the integration of Indigenous communities and Indigenous governments with regional municipalities and the province in terms of planning for and then delivering emergency response to the fires, including the management of evacuations from communities at risk from wildfires. The relationship previously had been very fragmented, very disconnected, and we appear already to be seeing significant movements to integrate across multiple levels of government for both the preparedness and response stages like we have not seen in the past.
Hi, I'm Colin Hardy. I'm the program manager for the Fire, Fuel and Smoke Science program in the Rocky Mountain Research Station for Forest Service Research. When I was asked about a catastrophic event in fire that might have changed the business, my first thought was an event that wasn't catastrophic, but it was, if you will, a possible near miss. And I look back at somebody who I look to as one of my heroes in fire, and that's Holly Maloney, who was a squad boss on the Lolo Hot Shots many years ago. I think this was 12 or 15 years ago, where the Lolo shots were down, I think in Region 4. The incident team gave them an assignment and she said, no, I'm not comfortable with that assignment. We're going to turn that down. And this was before the instructions that we developed on how to turn down an assignment. And she was very nervous about retribution for that and talked to the forest supervisor, Orville Daniels, whose response was to give every firefighter on the Lolo National Forest his business card with his home number and said, you stand down any assignment that you're not comfortable with and call me if it doesn't work. And the reason I look at this is it was a way to help empower firefighters to use situational awareness and LCES and actually look at, if you see it, say it. Holly was one of the first leaders that saw it and said it. And I think it got real traction in our ability to turn down assignments and develop those protocols. So she might have missed or might have been a near miss for a catastrophic assignment.
My name is Domingos Viegas. I'm a professor at the University of Coimbra and I do research on forest fires, fire behavior and fire safety. For sure, for me, the most catastrophic fire event was the one that happened last year in Portugal, in the area of Pedrógão Grande, in the 16th of June, in which a huge fire killed more than 67 people in the same area. And my team was in charge of investigating this fire and to look at the circumstances in which all these fatalities happened. And this fire, for sure, it changed, of course, my life, and it changed my, let's say, my perception of the risk of fire. And it is having a huge impact in Portugal in changing the whole system of protecting people and making them more conscious of the risk of fire and the need to protect themselves and to avoid this type of accidents.
Hi, I'm Dave CALKIN. I'm a research forester with the Rocky Mountain Research Station here in Missoula, Montana. I've been asked to reflect on a tragedy that has resulted in a positive outcome, and one thing that comes to mind is the terrible tragedy at Yarnell Hill a number of years ago where 19 firefighters lost their lives. I wasn't directly involved in that, but I have visited the site. My involvement really has been working with the regional office and helping them go through some risk assessment processes, particularly with the intent of improving firefighter safety and getting more fire on the landscape. And one of the things I've noticed is that the community support for wildfire, for getting more fire on the landscape, has fundamentally changed over the last 5 years. And Yarnell Hill tragedy certainly has had something to do with that. That also with the recognition that when we put firefighters in harm's way, it really needs to be to get good outcomes on the landscape and improve the outcomes for all of the people that are affected by fire.
I think 1994 in Storm King probably was the most significant. I think Storm King and the folks that died and the folks that lived there on that mountain, because of the diversity of fatality, hot shot, smoke jumper, hell attack, a few old salts. Levi Brinkley, I think, was the apprentice graduate there. So you had old to young, you had a variety of folks that died on the mountain, and you had a variety of folks that survived on the mountain. Really gave us, in the wildland fire profession, an opportunity to ask what went wrong. The survivors gave us a unique perspective, and because of the interagency nature of what we do, the aftermath of the tragedy, with the engagement, especially of the governor, Colorado, the chief of the Forest Service, the director of the BLM, allowed us for the first time, I suppose I was aware, doesn't mean it hadn't happened before, but it was certainly heartening, I suppose, to see us begin to ask ourselves questions about the proverbial thing that happens after catastrophe. Why did it happen, and what can we do to prevent it the next time? And so all of that work that occurred through late 94, 95, I think even into early 96 with the IMRT and all the recommendations that came out of Storm King caused me as a Type 1 incident commander, and I think caused all of us in the profession to ask ourselves about all the limitations that were noted in that report. Limitations about expertise, about management, about technical things like the weather. While I don't suppose, well, I know we didn't take action on every single one of the recommendations that came out of the IMRT. We tried for a very long time to change our way of operating. We tried to get agency administrators and fire program managers much more focused on their fire programs, much better equipped to try to make the kinds of decisions that agency administrators and fire program managers need to make. We needed to ask ourselves about what we needed to do operationally, and we had a whole wide variety of things that happened as a result of the IMRT. I hope, I don't know what a historian like Stephen Pine might say, but in my mind, 1994 was really a time where we hit an inflection point and went from thinking that fire was something that a bunch of old technicians needed to do because they could learn it on the job, to where we saw 94 and after 94, those technicians needed to be professionals, not professionals in terms of simply having a degree, but those technicians needed to be professional in terms of their approach, their continuing education, their focus on wildland fire management. And I hope that the legacy that we remember coming out of what now is approaching ancient history, coming on 25 years next year, is that tragedy pushed and caused a professionalization of the work that we do in wildland fire. And if we can carry that into the future and continue to think about the kinds of scientific leadership virtues that cause us to be excellent wildland fire professionals in the sense of having a profession. I think 1994 could go down in history as one of those key inflection points in wildland fire.